So I think everybody that we expected is connected in by Zoom. This will be kind of interesting because Jeff and I figured this would be just a question and answer. We don't have everybody in the room to talk to. And a big part of what we just wanted to share is how we do some of our quarter courses, how we do our planning, how we execute, by answering questions that any of you might actually have or have wondered about if you haven't done a study abroad course yet. Maggie, I know you're leading your first one this spring. Naha, Mapta, what about you? Have you done a quarter study abroad course yet?
I'm actually, sorry about the back.
I didn't quite catch that, Naha.
I'm actually planning to prepare a study abroad course. So I'm at the beginning stage of learning, what is the process, what's required, and how to go about doing so. So that's why I actually joined the meeting today.
Great. Okay, good. So then I guess Jeff and I will just say a few things in general, and then we'll answer questions that come up from there. International Ed has their process that they use, and really now you want to start talking with Megan and Josh over at International Ed if it's the first time, about a year and a half in advance. So towards the end of this semester, if you want to do a quarter 4 course next year, you want to start talking to them to kind of lay things out, because by August, they need most of the details to advertise it to students to get enrollment.
And you should plan on advertising yourself as well.
A lot.
Right? So you're going to end up doing most of the advertising. They'll do some, they'll have brochures and things like that, but you're going to have to put the word out if you want to get students.
So one of the things that Jeff and I kind of developed partly for our planning purposes, and International Ed now has a budget template that they can share with you that goes through how to do this planning and budgeting. This is a Google sheet that Jeff and I developed a few years ago and continue to use for our planning and budgeting. And this sheet for us goes day by day, as opposed to just a whole list of possible items that the International Ed one has. So you might want to use both styles. This is from the quarter 3 course that I did last spring, going to France. And so we lay out day by day where we're likely to be, what we're likely to be doing, and then costs, be it lodging, transportation, if that's involved that day, events that we have planned. And you see we did this all in local currency, euros, add up the cost per person for each day, and then go through what we anticipate the exchange rate will be, how many students we're likely to have. If there's 1 or 2 instructors, we do that planning. And then we factor in airfare, insurance, the instructors per diem, and start mapping out what makes sense and what fits. If you're going to get your salary as extra service, we factor that into the budget as well. And then we can look as a grid as far as if the exchange rate goes up or goes down, or the number of students goes up or goes down, how will things get affected. Can everybody see this spreadsheet okay? We should be sharing the screen, yeah. So, all right.
Okay, good.
And then I included other tabs. In my case, this particular trip, things got really messy because we were 2 days late leaving the United States, and so I ended up having to rework a huge portion of the course. But it allows us to keep track of possible lodging info, additional info based on a certain location. We can keep a list of students that are interested. So it's all in kind of one document, nice and clean for us to work with. And works well to give International Ed a good idea of what our thoughts are and what our budgeting is going to be. As we get kind of a little more detail and we're really pinning down, especially to share with students, we develop a calendar. Jeff originally started this kind of a calendar. I've picked up using it, where it really pretty well lays out day by day, time by time, how we're going to go about things, and then hotel information at the bottom. In my case, because we were planning on doing some marketing in Paris, I lay out what days certain markets were open and what hours they were open, so that we knew what we could do planning-wise. So this is another way that we go about organizing our thoughts and our process of planning.
Right. I mean, when I plan, I just kind of lay that calendar out first on that spreadsheet that you see right now. And then I'll just print it out, and then I'll go from there. I'll mark it up constantly, you know, when I have to make certain reservations by for whatever event I have to do. In fact, I think on my budget for spring, I've got to actually make a call today. But, you know, so you have to, and you have to know well ahead of time. So not only do you need to know ahead of time to advertise, you need to know ahead of time, because depending on where you're going, hotel accommodations might be tight, right? And so you want to make sure that you get some kind of hotel reservation set right away. Even, you know, put down the maximum, get reservations for the maximum number of students you think you're going to have. You can always revise it down. And, you know, depending on, you got to make sure you get the right hotel, so there's no cancellation fee or anything like that, and most places are good. So,
one other thing I guess Jeff and I should add is that outside of a couple situations early in our experiences doing this, we do all of the planning and organizing and finding the hotels and setting up tours by and large. We'll even go so far as to really look at what flights make sense and what flights we know would work well, so that we can inform the travel agent. These are the flights we'd really like to use for this particular course.
right. So flights are about the only thing that we don't actually do, but we do tell the travel agent. You know, for my Q3 course, I've been working with the travel agent. I said, this is when I want to go. These are the times I want. See what you can find. So, and this is what I budgeted. So, we did come in over budget by about $200, but then I made her work some more, so we got it down back into the budget. So, so be prepared to work a little bit with the travel agent. So,
you know, and having a schedule like this as well can work if you're going to have somebody else do some of your organizing in country. If you're working with another university or an outside group that's doing the groundwork for you, this kind of a plan can help them as well. One of the things that you probably notice in the schedule is there's some pretty good gaps in open space and some things that maybe have question marks or tentative. Those are things that at the time weren't finalized, and or it gives us buffer space. One of the things we've discovered is you don't want to plan every day to every minute. You need to give some flexibility, one, to give the students time to explore on their own and do their own thing, but also so that if an unfortunate event happens or you're planning to do something outside of the weather's horrible, you have some flexibility maybe to move some things around. And that's one of the things we've learned from the years of us doing these classes is leave some flexibility in place.
and just relax while you're doing it, because things are going to go wrong.
Unfortunately, yeah, things can go wrong. But at the same time, in our experiences, very few things major have gone wrong. But just be ready for the unexpected. We've discovered and learned it is incredibly valuable, if it's at all possible, for you to visit the location before you arrive with students. It allows you to have some knowledge and expectations of what happens when you get on the ground. You also sometimes discover and realize that what you thought you wanted to do wasn't very feasible, things are too far apart, schedules don't work, or sometimes you discover things that you hadn't expected that you really want to do with students.
Or you discover something you did want to do isn't really all that great, so you might decide to change it. And going ahead of time by yourself is good. And remember, Josh has money for that. Okay, so he can shoot some money at you as long as you have a decent proposal, and then you can go check it out. So.
Things going wrong and being flexible and knowing the location. I can give you an example. One year we had students in Belgium. I think it was 12 students. And we arrived at the train station in Brussels that morning to fly home. So we were going to take the train out to the airport, as we've done with other courses and other visits. I walked up to the ticket counter to get tickets for the group, and the ticket agent looked over my shoulder and looked back at me and said, "The last train just left for the airport." This was at 6 a.m. The conductors had gone on strike unannounced. So now we've got to figure out how to get 16 of us to the airport without the train service. We knew there was a bus option. So back to a different ticket agent, get tickets for the bus, get to the bus stop, and out to the airport. And it all worked out, but at least we knew what that option was, and it wasn't a situation where we were throwing kids in an Uber or in a cab or totally lost as far as where to go, what to do. We had that ability to change. So, questions that you might have about your planning process or an upcoming trip or situations we might have encountered. We really kind of wanted this to be, well, we could share some things with you folks and then answer your questions.
So what do you got?
So where do you go for currency rate exchange? Honestly, I typically just Google and look at what the currency exchange rate is between the US dollar and whatever. And
I personally use xe.com. I also have that app on my phone so that I can just pull up the app. So just xe.com. It's a pretty standard place. So there you go. Whatever currency you want. You can look at trends, right? So that you can kind of judge, well, let's see. It's January now, but I'm traveling in March. Is it going to go up? Is it going to go down? Historically, I mean, remember, you can't always trust that, but certain times of the year, it does fluctuate.
So that is one option that you have available, and that's actually a common site that I look at as well. In terms of what do your classes?
Quarter two. We've never done a quarter two.
No, that's question two.
Oh, question two. Jesus, sorry.
In terms of before the visit, It depends on which class we're doing, whether we're meeting once a week with students, or in a couple cases, our fermentation course, my food science course, we meet twice a week with students here. And part of it is to introduce the content and the science or whatever content it is, but a portion of that is also related to what experiences might they have in that host country or where we're visiting. And so probably a third of the course time, a quarter to a third of the course time is spent on getting them aware of where we are going, right? Whether it's a little bit of a language, whether it's cultural significance, whether it's historical significance, actually probably all of the above. So those are things that we do in the classroom before we go.
Right. You're going to find that a lot of your students have never traveled out of the country before. And so you're getting them used to the idea of they're not going to be where they usually, the situations that they're usually in. So they got to get used to that, whether it's language or just culture or whatever. So, my Q3 course, I meet once a week. And we talk, it's a cultural, it's a global studies course, so we talk culture and history, but we do a lot of, how do you take money out of the ATM, just use an ATM, et cetera, so things to expect.
And we have some of that travel information right in the syllabus that if people are interested in it, we can certainly share. In terms of contacts with affiliate organizations, universities in advance, when we did the course to the Czech Republic, we did because they helped organize a lot of it on the ground. And honestly, that was largely because of the language barrier, the language difference. In the Netherlands or Germany, when we go to Munich or Belgium or Scotland, we really don't have any direct affiliate contacts. We certainly have contact with venues, places that we're going to take students. If we need to book a tour, things like that, we make those arrangements in advance. But really, we're doing all that legwork individually.
Right. And those are the kinds of things that the more you do the same course, you build up those relationships. And so keep that in mind as well. If you find somebody that you think you can work with well, keep them in mind, email, phone, whatever, and use them again.
And we can give you a good example of that. Last year with our course to Scotland, as we knew the course was going to happen and the number of students we had, we were trying to arrange hotel rooms. And it was over a weekend holiday in the UK, but we were having a nightmare time getting hotel rooms arranged in the 2 locations we wanted to visit. And one of them we've been to, this would have been our 4th trip there, to that hotel. And the hotel owner, basically, I don't have rooms when we wanted to be there, but he could work us in earlier. And so we rearranged our entire itinerary so that we could, in effect, secure hotel rooms at reasonable prices. And it all worked out because we had that connection to that hotel owner, and he was willing to work with us to make it all happen. And so those connections are really, really valuable.
But that's another thing to keep in mind too. Our holidays, wherever you're going, are not necessarily the same as holidays in the U.S. And especially in Europe, they've got bank holidays, and so everything's closed. People are on vacation. They'll take a long weekend, so all the hotels are going to be more full than usual, which is also then why I say you got to start booking hotels early. For my Q3 course, I book hotels a year in advance. So,
in the case of banking agreements or contracts, we've certainly made agreements with hotels, museums, breweries, or locations we're going to tour in advance by email, by phone. Most of them are cancelable, and so that's not an issue. In a couple of cases, they wanted things in writing, And so what we've worked out is they submit the documentation to us, and we coordinate with Josh and Megan in International Ed to make sure that everything's fine. But if it's just really making a reservation and securing a place, you're totally allowed to make those arrangements. If there's payment required in advance, you work with International Ed, and there's ways to go about that process. And we've done everything from getting things paid for in advance to having to pay for everything on the ground by us. Early on, there were definitely trips where we were paying for everything, including multi-night hotel stays.
And getting reimbursed. Hopefully.
Yes. No, we always did.
We did.
They were good.
We did.
One other thing that I was going to kind of share with folks, if you weren't aware, if I'm trying to find flights or flight options, I will use Matrix, ITA Matrix, because it allows you to put in multiple airports to depart from, multiple airports to go to. You can actually, for quarter four courses, you have a little bit of flexibility on your departure, so you can look plus or minus that day. It also allows you to do multi-city. So if you think you want to fly into one location and then leave from a different location, this will allow you to kind of gauge what's the cost associated with that, and is it actually cheaper just to go back to the country, whatever location it is you went in and out of. And it varies. You have to factor that in. You have to factor in rail travel if you're going to be doing that for transportation. Here's the other reason to visit countries and locations in advance. Finding the information online is not always trivial. I know in Belgium, we've learned that you can actually purchase Belgian rail IDs. And it's been 10 years since we've done this. They were pretty inexpensive, but you could buy the rail ID. And then
I just found mine the other day.
Yeah. And then buy a week-long travel pass that allowed you to use any train, anytime, anywhere in the country of Belgium. Very inexpensive. And so one year with the students, that's what we did. But it required us to have a small passport-style photo of every student because it's a photo ID. So you want to be sure you have those in advance. Same thing happens with the Paris public transit system. You can get a photo pass and buy a week-long access to subway, the RERs, the buses, pretty inexpensively. And then the students can use it whenever they want. You don't have to worry about tickets. You don't have to worry about how many days or how many trips they can make.
As an example, some of that is changing too, though, because now we have technology. So I recently got a card, for the transportation card in Ireland, but then I think it was maybe a couple months ago, I read the article that said, oh, you know what, we're gonna get rid of those and you're gonna do everything by your phone, right? So just like Apple Pay or whatever, you just hold your phone up to the thing and there you go, deducts it from your account. Everybody's got a phone, no photo ID necessary. So.
That is going to create a little bit of a hiccup for our kind of situation where you need to pay for the students.
Right.
So do you end up giving them credit in advance so that they can use it, or how do you manage it?
Right. So
that's not something I've encountered. I have to think about how to handle that one.
I have a question. I've been taking students to Stockholm, and while I was there over the summer, there was very few places that accepted cash.
right. Yeah, Sweden is like
And-
cashless.
Yeah, and so I'm quite concerned, to make sure that the students are aware of like being able to use their cards over there.
Yep.
And, hopefully being able to do so without a, exuberant, foreign transaction fees.
Well, and that's the thing. So, we tell, even when we travel, when I take kids to Dublin, I notice that most of them don't even worry about cash. They all use their debit card, right? And so students now are of the mind that I got my plastic.
Okay.
I'm okay. Now, as far as foreign transaction fees, that's different. What I've discovered is that most credit unions don't charge you a foreign transaction fee, whereas most banks will.
Okay.
But, if the kid wants to put everything on a credit card, then you get the credit card that doesn't have foreign transaction fees, and there are a lot of them, right? Capital One, maybe if they've got a Chase Sapphire card or whatever.
Do you recommend that for students, or do you just kind of let them?
When I go, I tell them, they're like, "Oh, do we have to take money out ahead of time?" No. You're going to a first world country.
Yeah.
They have banks.
Yeah.
They have ATMs, right? So I said, use your debit card. That's all you need to use. And for the most part, you still get the odd kid that doesn't listen to you. But for the most part, they take their debit cards and they'll withdraw cash. Now in Sweden, it's going to be different. They'll just have to use their card.
Right. Okay.
And related to cards and cards in Europe, we're a little better because most of our credit cards now have a chip.
Right.
But it's not chip and PIN.
But most of Europe is chip and PIN, not chip and signature. And some places will be very adamant that they will only accept a chip and PIN card. Even if Visa and MasterCard say, no, they have to accept any of it. You might end up with a little bit of an argument.
Okay.
Now, if they see it as a chip and they scan it and then it wants them to sign, they'll be upset, but there's not much they can do because it's already been processed.
Also, always tell them to do everything in the local currency. Don't transfer. Don't do it in U.S. currency.
Yeah. And I'll let you respond to them.
So the question about I'm gonna back up just a smidge. Doing in non-European countries, I've only led to European countries, as is Jeff. So I can't really speak directly to that, although there are certainly people on campus that have done non-European countries, whether they're to South America, Africa, or Asia. There are people.
Lisa Glidden would probably be a good.
Glidden would be a good resource. Marcia Burrell would be a good resource.
I'll tell you one of the reverse situations. When I took students to Dublin one year, I had two students who were Indian citizens, and they needed, as Americans, we don't need the only visa we need is when they stamp my passport when I go in. Indian citizens needed a visa, but the two students took care of their visa by themselves ahead of time.
International Ed can help direct them with that a little bit,
But I think it's up to them.
It is up to them.
Unfortunately, I have to go.
All right. See you, Jeff.
Babysit.
I had a student from Haiti go with me to Italy one year, and she had to get a visa to enter Italy. And she worked some with International Ed to do that, but she did it on her own. And I know it requires trips to New York City to take care of it. So if U.S. citizens need a visa to enter wherever you're going, International Ed will work with everyone, I believe, to coordinate the visa for U.S. citizens to enter that country. Okay. Yeah, I mean, really, I would be turning to Josh and International Ed to coordinate what to do if I needed visa for U.S. citizens, where if I was going to a host country that required it, because they have experience with it, whether it's from a quarter course standpoint or whether it's a whole semester study abroad. They'll know what needs to happen. And yes, individual students will probably have to manage it, but let's see. And as Jeff said, with transaction fees, we make it clear with our students. We remind them a week or so before we leave the country, sort of the last class period, that they should contact their credit card companies and their banks to notify them that they will be traveling abroad, so that there's not a fraud detection happen and things get frozen. We remind students to be sure that their credit or debit cards are not expired, because we did have a case where a student had an expired debit card. That was our very first trip. I had a student in Paris this past year lose her credit card in an ATM, notified the bank, and a couple days later the bank was able to retrieve the card and get it back to her. But those things happen. But as you can see right here in the syllabus, in our travel tips, we're pretty blunt. Just use your ATM and credit card to get your cash. Don't try and do currency exchange. Don't use travel checks. They just aren't that common anymore.
Do you recommend students get SIM cards to work their phones within the country?
So with regards to cell phones, they can get SIM cards.
What about what you do for yourself?
So what I do is I just keep my U.S. phone number and pay the $10 a day, I think it is. I'm on a Verizon plan where it's a $10 a day travel pass, and then I have my data, texting, and phone service in country, and I think it's up to half a gig a day, maybe.
Yeah.
But what we instruct our students to do is, coordinate that, but really try and do as much as you can on the hotel Wi-Fi. We have found that setting up a group me, using the GroupMe app and setting up a group for the entire class has been helpful to communicate.
Do that just over Wi-Fi?
And then you can do that just over Wi-Fi. You can do it over the cellular data, but they can do it by Wi-Fi. And I used it really helpful when I was in Paris because I was the only instructor and I had 14 students. And I asked them when they got back to the hotel each evening just to throw a chat in that, hey, I'm back, or this group is back, so that if I woke up in the middle of the night, I could see who was around, or when I was up first thing in the morning, I could see, okay, everybody checked in, everything's fine. I've not used WhatsApp, but I know some of my students have for communicating. We've had students that have just run up whatever cell phone service they have. We've had parents buy more minutes international so they can do whatever. There's a lot of possibilities. And yeah, WhatsApp is a problem in some countries, or at least it's prohibited in some countries. You just have to find what's going to be the right fit for your group and what country you're going to. The prevalence of Wi-Fi, the prevalence of cell phones does make some planning aspects easier because you have the ability to communicate a little more readily. But I've not gone down the pathway of adding foreign SIM into my US cell phone. When I was on sabbatical in Belgium for 3 months, we bought just an inexpensive flip phone, Belgian style, that allowed us to do phone calls and texting within Europe, and just pretty much kept our US phones off and just used them under Wi-Fi.
have any more questions or at the
Um,
moment.
No, I think I've answered the questions they've posed so far. So Maggie, do you have something else?
Well, I kind of wanted to pick apart a little bit this sample itinerary, or wasn't a sample, right? This is what you did.
No, this is what I proposed.
What you proposed.
This is what I proposed.
How does that differ from what you
Actually did.
actually did?
Well, in this particular one, it differs a lot because we had the major problem.
Right. You had the 2
Um,
things.
But this is, and as Jeff had indicated as well earlier, he actually will start with this, especially if it's a newer country,
Mhm.
laying out what do I think I want to do when. And making notes if you have to
Yeah.
finalize plans certain times. If there's specific things that you know you want to do,
Right.
specific museums or you want to know when they're going to be open.
Yeah.
And so this allows you to start dropping those kinds of things in. In this particular course, we intended to be in Lyon for part of the trip and Paris for part of the trip. And so it was a matter of kind of mapping out how many days do we do in Lyon, what do we want to do. And I had, through my wife, a connection to somebody that runs a cooking school. But it was small, so I would have to break the class into 2 groups, which is why there's cooking class 1 and cooking class 2.
In this trip, just so this was a cooking trip?
This was a food science
Food
class.
science, okay, yeah.
Yeah, food science and culture in France. And so it was a way to really introduce
Yeah.
science to them, but in the context of food.
Yeah.
And
So, sorry.
go ahead.
So you did the cooking class and such, so then, what kind of drove your decision to do like the cathedral, right, or the Musée des Beaux-Arts?
One of the things to really get them some breadth and not just everything focused on the specific content for the course,
Right.
but some breadth and some broader perspectives. And so the Musée des Beaux-Arts, the Fine Arts Museum, it just fit.
Yeah,
In Lyon is actually, they've got an old Roman site amphitheater. So the thought was we'd probably do that. The cathedral wasn't too far from that location. And you can see as well, at that point, I have open.
yeah,
Part of that was going to be based on what's the weather like. It's the second day in the country, how worn out are the students, how crazy are things getting. It gives us some flexibility. It also gives us some flexibility because some students might want to go see the cathedral and some might want to go see the Roman site. So the option there would be I could split them up or let them do what they'd like. One of the things that we do going to Europe is when we land, we'll usually try and get things to the hotel, at least drop them off,
Mhm.
and then walk them around whatever location we're at. To give them orientation so that they've got an idea of the site, but also to do everything we can to keep them awake until about 8 o'clock at night to minimize jet lag.
Yeah.
And then we almost always are up and out the next morning.
Yeah.
To do something, just to adjust to the new
Just
time zone.
adjusted, yeah.
Um,
I guess I was curious, do you feel like all of your trips are very balanced in terms of like, you mentioned the breadth of like what countries, cities have to offer versus like focusing specific on content? I guess I say that because I'm concerned that if I can't get into prisons and courthouses and such, am I going to be mostly taking them on a big vacation versus,
and
being able to,
right, how do we strategize and how do we balance content, direct content versus global perspective, let's say. And this ties into what strategies do we use to keep us down. One of the things is in keeping costs down is as we think about what location we're going to go to. There are some countries in Europe that are great to go to maybe, but are extremely expensive. Switzerland being one of those. Now, if the content really drive you to those locations, you make it work. But one of the things in terms of balancing costs is we're not staying in luxury hotels, but we don't do hostels either with 40 people in a room. We typically will try, if we can, to get rooms that are triples.
Yeah.
To manage that a little bit. We do a lot of walking. We do a lot of local transportation. And if you could work out ways for passes that are cost saving, we do that to keep costs down. But we typically will choose our locations based on the course content.
Right.
There's something about the content that says we should be at this site. And then we build out from that. There's a small community in Belgium that we typically go to, Yves or Ypres, depending on whether you're Belgian or French, Dutch or French, which is basically right in the middle of World War I. Trench warfare, gas attacks, everything. And we go there so that it's easy to visit an abbey that makes beer and the cafe. But it's a good place to also reside. And we've then taken students on battlefield tour. There's a huge World War I museum there that is really pretty sobering because it does a lot with how horrible French warfare was. And so we take advantage of the history of that site to complement the content. And so that's also where having the ability to visit a country or location first allows you to start mapping out what are some of these opportunities.
That's right.
You know, a lot of the students that we've taken to Europe have never traveled more than a couple hours away from Oswego County. And so it's really all about eye-opening experiences.
So I see that you have an open day.
Yep.
Do you recommend that? You know, so I'm assuming what that means is that students are not accountable to any, except
So-
breakfast meeting, they're not accountable to any particular time.
Nope. So, and we've almost always, Jeff and I have almost always factored in some open day somewhere.
Yeah.
Whether it's right near the end of the trip or somewhere in the middle. It's usually after they've been in a location for a period of time and we know they should be comfortable with that location. We always instruct students to do things in small groups. Don't do things individually.
Right.
But on those open days, we've had students, we always like to know what they're going to do as well, but say, hey, I'm going to go do this all-day tour. And that's fine. A group's going to go do that. Another group's going to plan to just to shop and do whatever. Another group might plan to hit a couple different museums, maybe that are on their museum pass that we didn't require. It also just gives them a chance to do what they are interested in.
Yeah. And I like that. I think that that's, a nice, and, nice probably for the instructors, but also, important for them to, take initiative and, seek out something.
It's a growth experience.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm curious, so I've talked a bit to Allison Rank about, her planning of the trip and such, and so she had talked about how in the classroom instruction, she had it as a requirement to sort of have students pitch an idea of what outside of the trip that they want to do to try to get other students to join them. Do you do something like that too?
Not necessarily that way. But typically our first assignment it includes what do you want to do and see where we're going.
Yeah.
Because we're dealing with either food or fermentation, and we know we're going to plan a group meal, we usually also ask about food allergy restrictions. Just so we know
Yeah.
what we're getting into. But almost one of the first homework assignments we ever do in our quarter course is puts that back on the students a little bit. What do you want to do? What do you want to see? And that sometimes helps us realize, oh, we should rearrange our schedule and we should go for doing whatever.
Okay.
So it does give us some.
Yeah. So what if this? Sorry, I want to make sure I haven't asked any questions. What if the students done with that free time?
What have they done?
Yeah.
Like
have they gone on day trips? Like
a lot of them,
outside
there's certainly cases where people have done day trips.
Okay.
We've had the very first year we were in Belgium, we did, I'll say, a kind of organized open day where we actually did a day trip to Amsterdam.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
In Scotland, some of the students have done walking hikes to old castles or around the islands where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the students have organized and gone on wildlife boat tours that are provided within that community. In Germany, the one time, a couple of the open day possibilities, the weather was not good, but we could have gone down to Salzburg for a day trip, or the Zugspitze of Tallest Mountain in Germany.
And so
we give them some ideas.
give them some ideas. Okay.
I've had cases where family members have come to wherever the location is to meet.
Yeah.
And in one case, they went golfing. This was in Scotland. In another case, they went to Disney Paris because that's what their family wanted to do.
Yeah.
So it's fairly flexible as long as we know.
Yeah. Okay. And
you want to? Yeah. We're going to stop the session because it's almost wrapped up. But if you have questions, email me. Please email me or Jeff, and we can get you info. We'll answer more questions. But hopefully today was helpful.